The Star Wars Day at Sea 7-night Eastern Caribbean cruise adventure is one that David and I will never forget. From amazing meet and greets, incredible photo ops, and some unbelievable food on the Star Wars Day at Sea night, the Star Wars Day at Sea cruise was unbelievable. And in today's video, I'm going to go over a few of my thoughts and answer your questions about the Star Wars Day at Sea cruise. Starting it off first with a few of my thoughts, I thought it was a fantastic adventure. Now, it did start off with a little bit of those rough seas. That is in no one's control. No one can say to the sea, be calm for our adventure. Don't be rocky. So it did start off a little bit rocky on the fantasy, but it didn't take away too much. One of the biggest lessons learned from this adventure came from you and the type of seasickness medications that you recommend. Many friends recommended something called Bonnie, which I had to look into. There's a special seasickness patch, a band you can wear, things other than Dramamine that can really help. Now, I was using an herbal Dramamine, which I thought worked really well, but others swear by this Bonnie thing, or the patch, or the sea band. There's a lot of different things that you can get to help with seasickness. And I think in the future, if there's even a chance of rougher seas, I'm probably going to come prepared with a band or a patch or something. Now on to the stateroom itself, and stateroom 7008 was super nice. It was almost right over the bow, so you could see a lot of what was happening when you pulled into a port, the very large porthole, but that being said, it was further away from some of the things to do on board. I remember on several occasions, David and I would say to ourselves, okay, let me go switch out this battery for my camera, or change shirts, or whatever it is, and we're thinking to ourselves, wouldn't it be so much more convenient if we were somewhere in the midship, rather than having to walk all the way to the front of the ship. It wasn't bad, it's not that far to walk, but it's just that extra thought that goes through your head, especially when you have stayed midship before. Now I know what you're thinking, Michael, since you were right over the bow, didn't you feel more of the rocking back and forth? I'm sure we did, but even on that morning where I was feeling seasick and I had to kind of walk towards the center of the ship to feel a little bit better, I'm not sure how much of a difference it really made to be at the center of the ship or all the way over the bow. I'm sure there was some difference, but I couldn't really feel it in the moment. Now for the big question, if I had the option, would I take the forward room again or pay more for midships? For me, I would probably pay a little bit more for midships, but if it's several $100s different, I actually would probably go forward again. I didn't mind it as much as I thought I would mind it. I thought I would mind it a lot more, but I felt that rocking back and forth even in the middle of the ship on that day. I believe on that day where I didn't feel too well on board, I would have felt the same way even if we were in the midships. I think it has to do more with how high you are on those decks. So maybe deck 2 you don't feel it as much as you do on deck 7. Now on to the Star Wars Day at Sea itself. I gotta tell you, it was a lot of fun to meet with all sorts of Star Wars characters all around the ship. From stormtroopers in the lobby atrium to C-3PO and R2-D2 meet and greet to meeting Zam on deck 5, gotta tell you, those characters really made it for me. Now as a quick overview, we did have to book 3 of those meet and greets, Chewbacca, Darth Vader, and C-3PO and R2-D2, who were together. So 3 different meet and greets we had to book in advance. I actually forgot all about it until we got on board and they had some availability for us, which was super nice. So if you forget about that special meet and greet before you get on the ship, don't worry, they can help you once you get on board. At night, it all came down to that big show where we saw several of our favorite Star Wars characters all around interacting with us and with each other, and then at the end we had those big fireworks. It was a ton of fun, and for those Star Wars fans, I have a feeling you are going to love it. To my surprise, one of the best parts of the Star Wars Day at Sea cruise, in my opinion, was that dinner at night. David and I ate at Animator's Palette, but it really doesn't matter where you eat on board during that Star Wars Day at Sea because you have the same menu. I had Darth Vader's Nerf steak, and that Cloud City macaroon at the end was unbelievable. I gotta be honest with you, when I think of Star Wars Day at Sea cruises now, I'm gonna be thinking to myself, okay, what am I gonna get from that menu? That's probably the first thought that comes to my mind. Besides wearing a different costume and those pictures, it's that dinner. Somehow that dinner really blew my mind. Now during our 7-night Eastern Caribbean cruise adventure, David and I got off at Tortola and St. Thomas, the 2 destinations where we stopped besides Castaway Cay. We had a great time looking at some of the shopping areas, but in the future we do want to go to some of those other areas. I think it was St. Thomas where you can take this boat or bus to another island, something like that, where it's actually some secluded beach, supposed to be super nice. I gotta look into it. I definitely will look into it in the future, but so many more other opportunities on those islands that I'm looking forward to experiencing in the future. Luckily, the Disney Cruise Line has a habit of going to the same destinations again and again, so I have no doubt we'll have the opportunity to try some of those other destinations on the islands in the future. Overall, I truly enjoyed the Star Wars Day at Sea cruise adventure. Yes, it's true, David and I did get a little bit sick at the end of the adventure. Several other guests were sick as well, but luckily we made a full recovery, as you can see, and we're back at it. So that means another cruise has got to be in the future to make up for that illness right at the end. Now, those are my thoughts about the Star Wars Day at Sea 7-night Eastern Caribbean cruise, but I wanted to make sure I answered your specific questions, so I did a poll on Instagram and several friends got back to me with questions. Let's go over a few. From Jam Vicky, would you do it again? Very good question. I definitely would. I really enjoyed it. I feel like there was a lot to do throughout the adventure, and I do want to go back to those destinations. I love the 7-night Eastern Caribbean. So much fun. From Star Dreams, any plans on doing a cruise with both David and Michelle? Yes, that was actually something we were hoping to do on this adventure, but Michelle's schedule is a little bit difficult right now, so we're going to try and work that out in the future. I have no doubt in the future we'll do something all three of us together. What time would you recommend waking up for the Star Wars Day at Sea? Very good question. I recommend the earlier the better. Probably want to be up and around before 8 in the morning, maybe even earlier than that, just as, you know, however long it takes you to get ready in the morning, just so that you can be some of the first guests to walk around, take pictures with those characters, and get those background shots as well. Now, that being said, if you're more of a night owl, not to worry. Those characters are walking all around the lobby atrium and deck 4 and 5 throughout the day, all the way up to about noon, so you will find the characters all around there till about noon. Were there any Disney characters in Star Wars gear available for photos, like Jedi Mickey? That would have been fantastic, and Disney, I highly recommend that. I think it's a really good idea, but unfortunately they were not on this cruise. One of the most popular questions that I got, Star Wars Day at Sea or Marvel Day at Sea? It's a very good question. It does come down to you and what you like more, but between the two, for me, it's a pretty easy decision. Marvel Day at Sea. The reason I say that, I feel like there was so much more to do and the activities felt a lot more alive. There was so much going on, very interactive characters throughout the entire day. There was no break in the middle of the day. You could just have fun the entire day. Between the two, I would do Marvel Day at Sea again in a heartbeat. Star Wars was fun too, but Marvel, in my opinion, is the champion. In my opinion, there are two big changes that Disney can make to the Star Wars Day at Sea cruise to make it even better. First off, more characters, not just roving around, but maybe Mickey and Minnie and the other characters in their Star Wars outfits available for meet and greets, and at the end we need some kind of unique show. The show at the end where you saw the characters, it was nice, but it wasn't special. It wasn't super unique. It's something you can see at Hollywood Studios, or actually pretty close to it. Not the exact same, but close to it. For the Marvel Day at Sea cruise, it was a very unique show. So we need something unique like that for Star Wars Day at Sea at the end of the night, and that would really top it in my opinion. Rachel asks a very good question. Was the Star Wars Day at Sea menu better than the Powell dinner? This is going to surprise you. It will, but in my opinion, yes, it was. I know it shocks me as well. I feel like the Powell brunch that I had on the Disney Wonder was better than the Star Wars Day at Sea dinner, but the Star Wars Day at Sea dinner beat the Fantasy Powell dinner. There's a lot of factors moving around there, but I really, really enjoyed that dinner at Star Wars Day at Sea. It was delicious. Going on February 15th, sailing for Star Wars Day at Sea, and I didn't get appointments for Vader, Chewie, or the droids. Is it an issue? It shouldn't be. As long as you go to guest services, as soon as you get there and ask them for reservations, they should be able to help you. That's exactly what I did. Ashley asks, are all character meet and greets included with Star Wars Day at Sea? Yes, they are. There's no special expense for meeting any of those characters. It's all included. Another good question, did you enjoy cruising in January despite the rough seas? I did. I really did. That being said, I love cruising other months as well where it's not as rough. Uh-oh, if you're not a Star Wars fan, gasp. Would you still enjoy the cruise? I think so. I really do. There were a lot of guests you could tell who were not really kind of diving into the Star Wars piece of it. You can still enjoy the cruise just as a cruise without really getting into the Star Wars things on the Star Wars Day at Sea. So you can totally just enjoy it if you're not a Star Wars fan. Jimmy asks, how many people were in costume? Not too many. There were a lot of people in costume, but not as many as Marvel Day at Sea, just to give you an example. I would say maybe, I don't know, 200 people were in costume. So there were a couple people, but not everyone. Where do you get the personal navigator printout out, very good question. You pick it up from guest services. You can also ask your stateroom host or hostess to put it in your room the night before. Sometimes they can do that, sometimes they can't, but they always have it at guest services, and I personally prefer the paper version. Was it easy to take pictures with the roaming characters that weren't scheduled for a meet and greet? Good question. Yes, for some. Others, it was actually really tough. The Ewoks, I never really got a good picture of them because they did so much trading, they couldn't really stand still for a photo. And meeting Zam, I just got lucky. I got lucky meeting Zam that one time. So it really depends. You got to prioritize it if you want those photos. Isaac asks, after doing a second 7-night on the Fantasy, do you like the shorter or longer cruises better? Good question. I love longer cruises, but that being said, I've only been on one shorter cruise. If you count 4 nights or less as the shorter and 5 nights and more as the longer cruises, I've only been on one shorter cruise, so I do want to try other shorter cruises in the future. Kimberly asks, are there hints of Star Wars throughout the whole cruise week or just on day one? It's throughout the entire week, from movies in Buena Vista Theater to the Han Solo stuck in Carbonite in the lobby atrium throughout the entire adventure. You'll notice touches of Star Wars throughout the adventure, but not everywhere, not the whole time. Amber asks, is the pre-fireworks show too scary for little kids? I would say no. I think it's not too scary at all. It's just kind of a demonstration of Star Wars. Boba Fett kind of falls from the sky. It was really cool to see, but in my opinion, not too scary at all. Is the buffet the same as Pirate Night? I believe it was. It was just the decor that was a little bit different. You had the turkey legs, you had the crepes, the food looked exactly the same. It was the decor that was different. So Star Wars figures all over was the big difference. Katie asks, how is the food on the Fantasy compared to your September cruise? Very good question. We sailed with you and are curious. Very good question. I feel like the Fantasy has redeemed itself in terms of food. That September cruise, there was some fluke in the kitchen, not sure what happened. This cruise, the food was far better. Far better. Thanks so much for sending in your questions. I truly appreciate it. Let me know in the comments below if you've been on a Star Wars Day at Sea cruise adventure before, what you thought of it. Do you like Marvel or Star Wars? What do you think of the 7-night Eastern Caribbean cruises? And what do you think of all that food? Let me know in the comments. I would love to hear from you. Thank you so much for being a part of the magic with me. Until next time, have a magical day.